Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Friday. The weekend is, well, it's very, very nearly here. I was about to say it is here. We've still got a few hours left before we can say that. But it is a big weekend as well. Arsenal versus Aston Villa. Arsenal heading to Villa Park tomorrow evening, 5:30 kickoff, looking for revenge after those two painful and costly, very, very costly defeats against Unai Emery's side last season. Mikel Arteta has just been speaking ahead of that game at Villa Park at his press conference at London Colney. We'll go over some of the big things he's had to say. He's given a bit of a transfer update. Well, as much as Mikel Arteta can give when he gives a transfer update. We'll talk about Mikel Merino, of course, as that transfer nears completion. Now look what Mikel's had to say ahead of the game against Villa about his contract as well. He's been discussing that. Got a few questions from you guys as well to wrap things up as we head towards the weekend. And the big news is, of course, that Arsenal have now agreed a deal with Real Sociedad for Mikel Merino. Deal's going to be initially around £27 million, going to be a little bit more, just under £5 million in add-on for the Euro 2024 winner. That news sort of broke as myself and James Benj were recording Inside Arsenal Extra Time yesterday. So we did discuss it sort of on the fly yesterday as that news started to break from Spain that agreement had been reached. If you haven't seen Inside Arsenal Extra Time yet, you can find that. If you're watching on YouTube, it's down here in the videos, or if you're listening on podcast, it's down there as well. Myself and James do our season predictions as well, so you can give that a listen and see how wrong we might be, or right. You never know. Sometimes we get things right. So really good news for Arsenal. Of course, Mikel Merino is such a key part of their plans this summer. It's been ongoing for a long time. We've all got a little bit bored of it, haven't we? Because we just wanted this deal to get done. Negotiations have not been the easiest, but as I said in my video at the start of this week, all the messages I was getting as I sort of came back from my holiday and started speaking to people about Merino was this was going to be the key week, that it was now closer. It never had been, and the suggestions were it was going to get wrapped up this week, and that has now happened. Well, he's not signed on the dotted line yet. Obviously, he's going to be flying in. Reports from Spain suggesting he is arriving today to go through all the medical and complete his move to Arsenal. So big news for Arsenal, big news for Mikel Arteta. He's a midfielder they wanted. He believes he can fit into this sort of left 8 role long term. It's not going to happen before tomorrow's game. I can't imagine he's going to suddenly be thrust straight into the team at Villa Park. It might be that we see him for the first time against Brighton, probably off the bench next week. But really good news, and I think long term, when you sort of take the vision of how this team is going to build and what Arteta wants from it, it certainly looks like Merino in those big games is going to be the sort of that left 8 role that he wanted Kai Havertz to be last season. Then you're going to have Declan Rice, you would imagine, dropping back into that number 6 role. Although I know, judging by the comments on some of these videos, whenever we discuss this, not everyone agrees that Declan Rice should be playing in that role. But look, Declan's not going to end up on the bench, isn't he? Arsenal aren't going to spend 100 million on Declan Rice and then move him on the bench because they've signed Mikel Merino from Real Sociedad. So I think long term, definitely it's going to be Merino and Odegaard as those two 8s with Declan Rice ahead of them. But then other times in other games, you know, you can move Declan to play in that left 8 role. You can bring in Thomas Partey, Jorginho, that sort of thing. But it adds to the options. It's what Mikel wanted. It's going to be another big giant of a man, well over 6 foot, to add to the giants Arsenal already have on the pitch. And you just imagine the threat, as I've spoken about before. You think of Kai Havertz's goal at the weekend, but Bukayo Saka cutting in on that left foot, whipping those balls in. And you've got an extra runner in Merino now, rather than just Havertz and maybe Declan Rice coming in late. It's going to be a real weapon, I would imagine. If you've got Havertz maybe attacking the front post like he did against Wolves at the weekend, and then you've got Merino and maybe Declan Rice attacking the back post, you can just imagine that is a threat that is going to cause teams an awful lot of problems. And we already know how strong Arsenal are from set pieces. Add him into the mix, the amount of aerial duels that he wins, and you can just think Arsenal are only going to get stronger. So Nicholas Yova FC might well continue to grow. So Mikel, obviously, at his press conference today, has been speaking. He was asked about Merino, and he gave his generic response, which he always gives when it's a player who has not yet signed for Arsenal. He says, "No, I cannot talk about any player that is not with us. There's still time in the market, both ways, for all managers, for all the teams here. You can see it's getting very busy." He was then asked about sort of other transfers that could potentially happen. We've got transfer deadline day is a week today, so we've got 7 days left of the window. There's still plenty for Arsenal to do because you've got the Eddie Nketiah stuff. We'll talk about that in a minute. You've got Aaron Ramsdale's future that needs to be sorted. Potentially another incoming as well. I still wouldn't sit here and rule the possibility out of another attacker coming. He was asked about further transfers, and he says, "Look, anything can happen, and we have to be ready. A lot of surprises can come, and we will be prepared." He was asked if the Merino deal was going to be done soon. He says, "I don't know soon. The full focus is on the players that we have at the moment, the big match we have at Villa, and that is it." So that's what Mikel's been saying about Merino and potential new transfers. Obviously, we've got Eddie Nketiah to discuss as well. He'll be training today, according to Mikel Arteta. We know talks are ongoing with Arsenal and Nottingham Forest to get this deal over the line. Those talks are progressing well. It's believed to be very, very close, but nothing has happened yet. Certainly by the time of recording this video, by the time you're watching it, things can happen very, very quickly. And a deal might have been agreed, and Eddie Nketiah might have been given permission to travel up to Nottingham Forest and complete that move. But it hasn't happened yet. Mikel was asked about it, and he said, "I expect Eddie to train with us today. Be prepared for tomorrow, and that's it. Whatever happens will happen if it's good for everybody." So obviously there he's saying, look, if it's a deal that suits us, it's a deal that Forest are happy with, and it's a deal that Eddie's happy with, then this is a move that will happen. But as it stands, it hasn't happened yet. I mean, he says, "I expect him to train tomorrow and be prepared." Sorry, I expect him to train today and be prepared for tomorrow. It'd be really interesting if this deal hasn't happened by end of play today, when Arsenal travel up this afternoon to Nottingham to head to their hotel ahead of tomorrow's game. If it hasn't happened, it'll be interesting to see if Eddie does actually make that trip. You go back to pre-season when obviously the Emil Smith Rowe to Fulham stuff was happening. Emil was left out of the squad for the games over in the USA. He was with the squad, as in the travelling squad, but in terms of the match day squad for those matches against United and Liverpool, wasn't it? Emil didn't play, and Mikel said afterwards, "Look, things were ongoing. We decided not to play him." So I think it'll be very interesting to see if Eddie does make the squad for tomorrow, if the deal with Forest hasn't happened yet. I think that will tell us just how close it is or not. But that's certainly one we're all expecting to happen. But until that deal's agreed, then you never know. And there's still plenty more. I mean, only a week left of the transfer. I can't believe how quickly this summer's gone, to be honest. I can't believe there's only a week left of the transfer window. And it'll be very, very interesting. As Mikel says, look, they've got to be prepared. I spoke about it yesterday. You can't rule out at this stage a late move by Arsenal to strengthen an attack. And honestly, that the Twitter aggregators were just jumping on what I was talking about with Team News and Ticks yesterday, and suddenly all tweeting out these very hastily put together quotes from what I was saying that weren't actually what I said at all. And basically saying that I'm predicting Arsenal are going to make a move for Nico Williams and that sort of stuff, which obviously I didn't say. And those who watched it know I didn't say it. And I did have to correct it on social media. But, the point I was making at that time is you just never know how quickly things can change in the transfer window. And I used the Thomas Partey one as an example because that summer, right at the end of the window, the messages we were all getting was nothing's going to happen. But then a day later, suddenly, bang, Arsenal go and splash £50 million pretty much on a player and activate his release clause. So you just never know. And we'll wait and see. As Mikel says, Arsenal just have to be prepared. And I'm sure they are. Well, other interesting stuff. This was Mikel on his contract. We know he's out of contract at the end of this season. As I've said many times, I'm fully expecting that is a deal that's going to be agreed pretty comfortably. Everyone's very, very happy. No one wants to make a change. Arsenal love working with Mikel Arteta. Mikel Arteta loves working with Arsenal. The team is in fantastic shape. It continues to improve season after season. It's just a deal that is going to happen at the right time. Mikel's spoken about it before, and he's always said, look, naturally it will happen at the right time. He's gone into it a little bit more in depth today. He says, look, the focus has been on the transfer window, and we've had quite a lot of things to do and discuss. We are on it, and we'll take care of that, his contract, in the right moment. He was asked then if that means that, things will really ramp up once the transfer window is closed. And he said, yeah, I'm excited and I'm very grateful to be where I'm sitting and the people that I work with every single day. It's really difficult to find that harmony, that trust, that belief, that same alignment in ambition. And it's something that I always mention. I believe that we have an unbelievable time ahead of us. It's very excited. It's very exciting. And I am very excited about it. I mean, when you listen to those words, it's just going to happen. I've never sat here and been worried about Mikel Arteta's future and the fact that his contract was running down. It was always just felt inevitable that at the right time, when they'd all just sit down and they'd just get it done, because he's not finished with Arsenal yet. Arsenal are certainly not finished with Mikel Arteta yet. I mean, they absolutely love the work he's doing. There's no doubt about that. The players love him. He's building this young squad, and all these, Mikel Merino, for example, is a player that Arteta absolutely wants, and is a player who could have gone elsewhere this summer. He's had interest from Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, but he wanted Arsenal. And there's no way he didn't sit down with Arteta and talk to Arteta when these talks were going on and say, "Oh, your contract's running out. So if I sign, are you going to walk away in a year's time?" Those players would have wanted assurances from Arteta that he was going to stay. And he would have given them those assurances, because he knows he's going to stay, and Arsenal know he's going to stay. It will happen, and it will happen very, very soon. So I don't think we're going to have to wait too much longer to find out that Arteta has signed his new contract with Arsenal. Right, moving on. Obviously, we've got a really big game tomorrow, no doubt about it. I mentioned it at the start. Revenge is going to be on Arsenal's mind after what happened yesterday. Villa, the only team to beat them home and away last season. I mean, both defeats really, really costly, especially the second one, because, ultimately that was a defeat that, when you look at it, you'd say cost Arsenal the title, because had they won that game and then gone on to win all the rest of the games, which they did, then the title would have been theirs. So it was in their hands at that point, and they lost the game against Villa. And yeah, it was a really painful and costly defeat, but both of them were. And they were weird games, because Arsenal played really well in both of the games. Well, not really well. I thought the game at Villa Park, they were certainly the better side. They went behind early, and then they spent the rest of the game just dominating the match, messing up in the final third, not making the final run or making the final pass, or going a little bit early and getting caught offside when they had the whole of the pitch to run into because of Villa's high line. I don't think Villa had another shot after they scored. And then obviously the game at the Emirates, I mean, that picture there of Trossard's miss at 0-0, it's still just such a painful memory. I can barely bring myself to look at it, because, that goes in. Arsenal was so good in that first half, created so many chances, none better than that one. He scores that and Arsenal go ahead in that first half. They go on and win that game, and then potentially they go on and win the title. You can't say that for certain, because who knows how things would have panned out after that. But I'm absolutely convinced that goal goes in from Trossard. Arsenal go on and win that game against Aston Villa. It didn't happen, and it just summed up the two games. They had the chances, they didn't score them, and Villa punished them at the other end. And they can't afford for that to happen this time, because Villa are a very good side. They had a good win against West Ham at the weekend. Mikel was asked about the difference between the two sides last season in those two games, and he said, look, they scored and we didn't. It's very simple. In the two games, even though we had an enormous amounts of chances to do that, we didn't take it, and that was one of the big differences. There are other details for sure, which we have analysed, and we have to do better tomorrow. Talking about Villa, he said, look, they're a really good side. They're well coached. They dominate every aspect of the game. You give them space to run, and they are phenomenal at it. When you give them no space and they have to find it, they're able to do that too. He also talks about their threats at set pieces, and he says, look, that's why they did what they did last season, because they are very good all around the pitch, and they are. They're a fantastic side. Emery's done an amazing job, and they're going to be, they're in the Champions League for a reason this season, because they're a really good side. I think it's going to be really interesting how Arsenal do in this game and how they approach this game tomorrow, because it's Villa's first home game of the season. It's 5:30 kickoff. It's going to be a very, very fierce and hostile atmosphere at Villa Park tomorrow, no doubt about that. Can Arsenal deal with that? Can they go there and stamp their authority on the game and sort of suck the life out of what's going to be, as I said, a very hostile Villa Park? Can they show already at this early stage of the season that they are the real deal? And I think if you can go to Villa Park and you can get a statement performance and a statement victory this early in the season, it's going to give you a huge boost for those really difficult away games to come against Spurs and against Manchester City as well. It's a massive game, this, even at this stage of the season. It's a massive game. I don't think a point would be a bad result, but Arsenal to go there and win would just be absolutely huge. And fingers crossed they can get that done tomorrow. And if they do that, some of the big players are definitely going to have to stand up and perform. And the team selection is going to be really, really interesting. We know that. I've spoken about it before on who's going to play at left back, that sort of thing. Are you going to play Timber? Interestingly, Mikel was asked today in the press conference, could Timber be an option in midfield? And he said he can play in various positions. His versatility is one of his biggest strengths. He's been out for 11 months, and it's great to have him back. He played some quality minutes the other day, like Alex Zinchenko did as well. I think Alex was really good, especially in the first 60 minutes against Wolves, having that capacity in the squad to change things around and find other things that the team needs in that moment is very valuable. So an interesting thought there of Timber playing midfield. I can't really see it myself, to be honest. But I think it's a big decision to make on who plays at left back. He was asked as well, Mikel, actually just sort of moving on from the Villa stuff, just about Declan Rice and whether he should be seen as a 6 and an 8, because it's a big debate, and it's only going to increase, I think, once Merino is signed and starts to bed himself into the team. And he said, I think both. At his age, it would be a big mistake not to do that and not to have the capacity to play in different positions. And then within the game, he'll have different role in relation to the opponents and what they do. Last year, he showed he has the ability to shift from one thing to the other, sometimes within the same game. And with the short squad we have, I think that's really important. And it is really important. I think the fact that Merino's coming in, again, it's going to give the Arsenal the capability to probably have their strongest 11 in mind for big games. And I imagine that Rice would be 6 for those big games and Merino would be 8. But then in other games, you take Merino out, leave him on the bench. You can play Rice as an 8 and you can play Jorginho or Thomas Partey. They're just on Timber if he was going to be fit for the weekend. He said he had a really good preseason to a point. Then we had to stop him because he had a little issue there and we didn't feel like he was ready. We have to build him up. We have to be cautious. So I'm not sure. So, that's going to be the big decision on Mikel. If Timber's ready to play sort of 60, 70 minutes, I think he should probably start this game. If he's not, then I think you just go with Zinchenko once again. And like Mikel said there, I did think Zinchenko had a decent showing last time out against Wolves. Right, moving on to some questions and comments from you guys, sort of continuing on the left-back debate. Steve here says, why not have Calafiori at left-back, Timber in the number 6 role, which Mikel's just spoken about, along with Odegaard and Rice in midfield and Trossard on the left wing. The only thing I think Calafiori is sort of long-term. I see him potentially as Arsenal's first choice left-back at the moment. Whether further down the line he ends up being a centre-back for Arsenal, we'll have to wait and see. But right now, from what I've heard, he's coming in more as a left-back than anything else. But I just don't see him being thrown straight into the Villa game. The fact that Timber came on ahead of him last week against Wolves, I'd be very surprised if Calafiori then suddenly starts this game. So if Zinchenko is not going to start for me, I still think it will probably be Timber. Swift Gifts asks, hi Charles, what does signing Merino mean for Vieira? Yeah, me and Team News and Ticks were talking about this, debating it in yesterday's show about whether there could be a late loan move for Vieira in the window. Team News and Ticks has heard that could potentially be a possibility late on in the window, provided Arsenal do get the Merino deal done. I'm not sure I would sanction that. Obviously, look, it's just me talking with my opinion, but I still think I think Arsenal could potentially leave themselves a little bit short if you let Vieira go at this stage. Depending on what happens with Reece Nelson as well. So what does it mean for Vieira? It's going to make it harder for him, no doubt about that. But this is high-level, top-end Premier League football. It's sink or swim time. And if Vieira can't force his way into the team and he can't show that he's good enough to make an impact in the team, then he's gonna sink, unfortunately. So what it means for him is just going to have to fight a hell of a lot harder to get his minutes. And that's it. It's that simple, really. And here's one from Vet Para before we head off. He says, I think we need 2 things versus Villa. We can't give them anything defensively, and we need players that can pass the ball through the lines with them playing that high line. With respect to B, he says, I think our 3 best players at that are Jorginho, Zinchenko and Partey in that order. In terms of A, I think it would probably be a bridge too far to have Jorginho and Zinchenko on the pitch at the same time. With that in mind, I would start Jorginho at 6 and Timber at left back. If you want to chase the game, I'd bring on Zinchenko and Partey together. Would obviously love a win, but I don't think a draw would be a terrible result. Yeah, a draw would certainly not be a terrible result. You can't, this is a team, Villa beat Arsenal last season at home. They beat Man City last season at home. You can't go into it and thinking a draw would be a terrible result. It wouldn't be. But obviously you want to win. I just can't see Jorginho playing this game. I just think everything that we've seen so far in pre-season, at the end of last season, the start of this season, suggests that Partey is firmly ahead of Jorginho in the pecking order now. And so I'd just be surprised if he brings Jorginho in. I wouldn't be against it because I think Jorginho is a fantastic player. But I just still think right now, I think it'll be Partey in that 6 role. You'll have Rice and Odegaard ahead of him. And like I said, the big decision for me is who plays at left back, whether it be Zinchenko or Timber. Right, that's it from me, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. As always, I really do appreciate it, whether you're watching here on YouTube or you're listening via the podcast. If you want to get involved in tomorrow's show, where we'll look a lot more deeper into the Villa game, you want to give me your thoughts on who should start, your predicted 11, that sort of thing. You know what to do. Get into the comments, leave them below. I'll pull some of them together and get them included into tomorrow's show. Until then, have a fantastic day, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.